Hey, do you want to be a real man? Great. We need more real men. Let's talk about it with Brant Hansen on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Hey, we're so glad you're here, and I say it a lot because I mean it every time I say it. You always have a seat at our table. I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter, our executive producer, is here. Matthew believes that bacon is proof that God exists and that he loves us. And our producer, Jinx, is away on business. And we're thinking maybe he's going to get a haircut. This show is a lot like Jinx's hair, long, a little unmanageable, but usually clean. He'll be back next week. And our video director and one-man IT department, John Myers, is in his tech bunker. John says, any room is a panic room if you've lost your cell phone in it. And that is true. And Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. Guys, if your weight loss resolution didn't work, George says, consider growing a beard. It's sort of like yoga pants for your face, and it will help. And Kathy Wyatt is the soft, feminine side of this program. How soft? How feminine? Enough to single-handedly balance out this mob of manliness.
Yeah, I'm not sure why I'm here today.
Listen, you'll find this book. Out. Brant didn't just write this book for men. He wrote it for everybody. Actually, that's what his marketing director said. You can double your sales if you write a book for men and convince women that it's for them too. Brant is one of our favorite people in the world. He's an author, nationally syndicated radio host, an advocate for healing children with correctable disabilities through Cure International. He has written for CNN, Com, The Washington Post, U.S. News and World Report, Relevant. His latest book, which I hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, is The Men We Need, God's Purpose for the Manly Man, the Avid Indoors Man, or any man willing to show up.
I love that line.
Yeah, well, hey, Brant, thanks.
Hey, thank you. Honored
thanks for taking your time to be with us. I know how busy you are. First, a simple question. You didn't already have enough enemies? What possessed you to write a book about 4 men on how to be a manly man?
Okay, 2 things. Number one, I'm not a manly man. Like, I can't fix anything. I can't. The last time I was on a motorcycle, I'm not making this up, I hit a parked truck. I actually collided with a parked truck. And that's the last time I'm ever getting on one. Like, I'm not man enough to handle this stuff. Not lying, I took my son, Justice, when he was younger, I showed him how to change the oil. And what I did is I said, I'm going to show you how to change the oil. And we drove to Jiffy Lube and I showed him how to talk to the salesman. Like, they're going to bring out the little air filter, tell them you don't want one. Like, so I'm not the guy to write a man book typically, but my producer is a brilliant woman, Sherry Lynn. And she's been working with me for a while. She said, you know what? I was raised with certain kinds of guys, and I was raised without a good dad. But as soon as I was in your house, I noticed how your daughter and wife relate to you. And it's very interesting. They clearly feel totally secure. And she's the one that encouraged me to actually write this book. knowing that I'm not. I play the accordion. Like that's not like, I'm not bragging. It's actually a threat, but I do play the accordion. I play the flute. So I'm not the typical guy to write this book, but that's kind of the neat thing. So it's that thing plus the fact, as you know, there's been a ton of deconstruction of masculinity. And I think a lot of that is good. That can be a very healthy thing to go, hey, we don't need toxic stuff. We're tired of this narcissistic domineering idea. Like I get it. So what I want to do though is turn to the deconstructors and go, okay, so what is the distinct vision for masculinity that's a coherent idea that's actually beautiful? Can you articulate that? And the response is generally no. So I'm actually taking a shot at it, and I could be wrong. But what I'm doing is I'm saying we need a vision. Guys actually need a vision for what masculinity actually is. Not the usual trappings. You don't have to climb rocks. You don't have to hunt elk with your bare hands or whatever. Like, but what is it? And so I'm saying, I think it's the job that Adam was given that Eve wasn't. Like, he was given the job of keeper of the garden. And that's a job that means like you're cultivating and you're creating space for others to thrive, like vulnerable species that wouldn't thrive in the wild. In a garden, they do. They bloom, they become beautiful. And you're creating this secure area that you protect and keep, and it allows the vulnerable and like to flourish. And like, that's my sphere. My sphere of influence is my garden. Even though I'm a flute playing guy that can't fix anything, I actually can be a keeper of the garden, and anybody can, any guy can. And I think that's distinctly masculine. And then what's more, I think women call it out of us. They spot this. And whenever we are effectively what I'm describing here, they find it like really attractive. And I say this not as an inducement for guys to get the book, although I'm certainly okay with that, but actually to tell them like women intuitively understand what we're for. And so they respond to it. And I can give you lots of examples of that, but I've already done a soliloquy for a while. But like, women recognize it, they're attracted to it, they call it out of us, and it's this keeper of the garden thing. I'm convinced.
That'll work. I think as I read your book, I thought, I can do this. I can be this. Maybe not well, but I can do this. I can create this for my grandchildren and for my daughters and for our family. It's not a big garden, but it is a garden, and it is one over which God has placed me. And so I love this. By the way, I love Sherry's introduction too, or preface. You ought to read that every morning of your life. I'm going to talk to our producer and executive producer and show it as an example of something they could write for me sometime. But they refuse and won't do that. But
I was just going to say the reactions from women have been really interesting. So I've got like a launch team. I got 400 or 500 people like that are previewing the book and going back and forth on it. But I have had women that call themselves unapologetically feminist who are reading this and saying, this is exactly right. Which is really interesting because like anytime, the death knell is what you're talking about, the potential cancellation is for making any distinctives at all about masculine, feminine. But this is a life-giving thing, I think, for most reasonably minded people. They're going to go, actually, this isn't about domineering masculinity, but it is a distinct masculinity that would be great for everybody around us if guys actually did this.
I agree. And I was kidding you about a marketing tool to say this is for women, but it's really for everybody. It's kind of a handbook on how to live life in a way that'll be a lot better for you. Won't help you in playing the accordion. But by the way, we have a friend in Nashville who's an accordion player, said he went through a tragic incident recently. Somebody broke into his car and his accordion was in the back seat. Said when he got back to his car, there were 5 more accordions.
I knew that was coming.
So this is what is, we're running out of time on this segment. So I probably ought to ask you a yes, no question, but I can't think of one. What is the heart of being a man? Give me a sentence answer and we'll flesh that out on the other side of the break.
Well, I think, again, it's about allowing people around you to flourish. That means defending that space. That means making people around you secure. That means being a huge fan of your wife and kids and the vulnerable little blooms that could bloom if you were a source of security. That's life-giving.
Wow. And probably, and I think you point this out, not exactly what Adam did in the garden. Right. She was obviously running things and gave him the fruit. And it all starts with women. And I'm not even going to let Kathy speak until the other side of the break. Guys, you got to get this book. It's like Brant's other books. It's refreshing. It's funny. It's honest. And it goes to the heart of some very, very important matters. We kid about it on this program, but I want you to know this is a great book. It's called The Men We Need. God's Purposes for the Manly Man, the Avid Indoorsman, any man willing to show up. Guys, we're going to leave, but we're going to show up on the other side of the break. Hey, we're so glad you're with us. Thanks for joining us. We're hanging out with author Brant Hansen, and his latest book is The Men We Need, God's Purpose for the Manly Man, the Avid Indoorsman, or any man willing to show up. Brant, I just mentioned, and you just gave a sentence that was good, the garden and Adam and Eve. Why don't you flesh that out a little bit for us?
Okay, so Adam's given this job, which I'm arguing should be the job of every man, which is keeper of the garden. And I always thought when Eve was tempted by the serpent that he was somewhere else, like off naming animals or something, like whatever he was doing. But if you look at the text, it sounds like he's right there with her the entire time. I mean, you can look it up. I included it in the book, but it's just like he was with her. It's the way it looks. And he did nothing. Like he was supposed to be the keeper and protector of this garden. He allows this enemy in to pull one over on her. And then she actually even hands him the fruit. Like he's so passive. I almost get the impression he's lying down. Like you can't even grab your own fruit. Like she has to hand it to him. He's so remarkably passive. And then, so they're both cursed, right? Because they both have sinned. But God's reaction is, Adam, where are you? Mm. He doesn't go, Adam and Eve, where are you? It's like, Adam, because I made you the keeper of this place. You were supposed to be the protector. She's given this other role, which the best translation is rescuer. It's used, this word, we sometimes translate helpmate or something, like it's used in other contexts about God himself coming to our rescue with his armies. Like that's Eve. And I find that very interesting. So he failed. And I do think that that's our temptation now. And I talk to counselors now who are marriage counselors, and they say they see more toxic passivity than they do the toxic domineering variety in marriages. Both are toxic, but this passive thing introduces chaos into your garden because you're not actively watching over your family, for instance. You're not as engaged as you should be or in your life. And that doesn't create order out of chaos. It allows more chaos to happen, and people have to step up and fill in.
And it seems like this passivity is not just the domain of guys who are married and families. It's kind of a cultural thing. You have this quote here It says, my sin isn't sin because it's on a random list of activities that God just doesn't happen to like. My sin is sin because it stops me from being who I'm supposed to be and what I could have been. So it feels like this passivity. It's not just, hey, I'm occupied with all these things and it doesn't matter because it's just my world. It has a lot more ramifications, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think about the number of guys, and there's so many. And you may know, as you're listening to this, you may know guys in your life that are like this, or just kind of checked out to virtual stuff. I used the Oculus for the first time. Like my brother has it for a video game the other day. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. And I'm a video game guy. I like that. I grew up with them. I still enjoy them. Like, I know how fun it is. I get it. But guys are checking out of real life and they're going, well, as long as I'm not hurting anybody, what does it matter? And I'm trying to say, you are hurting people by not showing up. You actually do have a purpose, and what you do actually does matter. So the vulnerable people in your neighborhood, or people you could have taught, or people you could have protected, or people you, like, if you were engaged and you showed up, that's not going to happen now. There might be a woman that's looking for a guy who's growing up as a man that's not going to have you because you decided video games is the way to go, or virtual life. Like, there are people impacted. Nobody's on an island. Like the idea that your sin is private is a myth. We all affect each other. The upshot of that, though, is not a guilt trip, I hope. It's more like, guys, you matter. Like, your particular context that you're in, the skills you have, the talents you have, the things you could have brought to bear, it matters. So that's why I'm saying, like, anybody who bothers to show up, we can use whatever we have to fill this role. I'm not tough. I don't know how to fight. I've never been in a fist fight in my life. Like I told you guys, I can't fix anything, but I do have words. And I use my words, like for Cure, this hospital network I work with, like just as an example, to get kids surgeries that are the most vulnerable people in the world. Like, that's a real blessing that I get to do that. I can't believe it. Like, it's really wonderful. Like, who would have thought? So we can all use whatever we have.
That's interesting.
Brant, you address also what has been brought up as a couple of crises actually, but one of them kind of goes along with what you were just talking about in terms of checking out, is the seeming porn addiction, online porn addiction that so many men seem to struggle with. How do you address that? What did you find out about that?
The only hope that we have is a vision for something better. You can't just quit something because you're just got so much willpower. You're able to just go, I just out-muscled this problem. It's like, no, you have to have a vision for something better. So I'm trying to give guys that vision. Like, if you actually have purpose, you can replace some of the things in your life that are a problem. The other thing is, just on a concrete level with guys, I'm telling them, I feel sorry for us. It's not been this hard for any men in any culture in the history of mankind. Nobody has had this at their fingertips. This supernormal stimulation that renders the rest of life gray by comparison. No one has had access to that source, but we do. And it's heartbreaking and it's sad and it affects all of us in some way. What I'm trying to say is there is a vision. There's a way to live. And by the way, once you engage in these other things, you don't have as much time in isolation anymore. It becomes less of an issue by restructuring your life. Dallas Willard was really big on that, about our disciplines. Like, you can change some circumstances in your life. I've mentioned taking guys from my high school youth group to Mexico to do some work for a week. And we worked so hard. These are guys I was really close with, and they always acknowledged that pornography and lust was their biggest problem. But at the end of like a week or 10 days where we were working all day long, even though girls were on the trip and everything, I took the guys aside. I'm like, hey guys, has lust been a big issue this week? And it dawned on them, like, they started laughing, like, no, we haven't even had time to think about it. Like, we've been building this house and we've been laughing together, and it's been 110 degrees and we're sweating, we're making meals, and we're laughing about our environment that we're in, the tents we're at. Like, we haven't had a chance to think about it. We've been working too hard. So there is something about restructuring your life once you engage with people and having a vision that can make a big change without just willpowering through life, if that makes any sense.
Makes a lot of sense. the idea of just showing up in life, and the whole concept of the garden, tending it and keep it. I could see how people who identify as feminists and have a serious problem with some of the things you're saying would stop and say, you know, that's the kind of man I'm looking for. I didn't know it till I read this book. So, good book, The Men We Need. And we really do. We're copping out all over the place. And I'm not trying to create guilt. It's just a fact. We got to stop that. You first. By the way, we're coming back, so don't you touch that dial or computer. We're glad you're with us. And by the way, if you haven't heard, Key Life recently launched a brand new 16-day devotional on the YouVersion app called Born Free. And if you want some details and your devotional life stinks, you ought to go to keylife.org/born free.
Brant, I really liked in the very beginning of the program when you were talking about Adam and Eve in the garden, and because I think I grew up, and I'm what I say is in no way trying to take away from the fact that Eve made a big mistake. Not saying Eve was okay, but I remember as a child growing up and hearing the story of Adam and Eve, and pretty much through my entire life, there's been either an overtly, it has been either overtly stated or implied that, the problem started with her because she was the one that, that took the fruit, and then she took it to Adam. And I never even entertained the thought before until what you just said about when God said, Adam, where are you? And where was he in terms of protecting her, and all of that. So I, as the female side of it, I appreciate that. Again, not trying to alleviate responsibility on either side, but as a female who's never been married, maybe the only good thing about that is, boy, does it give you the opportunity to view marriages and to see the ones that, for the most part, as much as you can tell, being an outsider, are successful, and the ones that you think, nah, this one's not going to get off the ground. And then there are always the surprises. But, the thing that I know from those that are successful ones are that the women that I know who feel safe and protected are the ones that bloom, and and everything that happens within the structure of their families, their children, et cetera, is something to really behold. And I think we were talking off the air, all this situation in Ukraine right now. This man, and I don't know anything about his past except that he was an entertainer. I'm sure he's not lily white at all. But man, he just has risen to the forefront of this as, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to do what needs to be done. And I'm going to protect the women and children, and I'm going to do whatever. And boy, I tell you what, that's the most adorable man that's come down the pike in a very long time.
Yep. Okay. So I just pitched an op-ed on this subject on Zelenskyy. Like, why is he, you can look it up, the heartthrob of the world. Like, he's attractive on this. They made pillows with his face on it and sold out within an hour.
I'd buy one.
No, okay. Because, and this, I'm trying to tell guys, like I start the book like this, like trying to explain to guys why women find this so attractive. But all Zelenskyy has done is he's gone from being he's 5'7", average looking guy, apparently, by all accounts, comedian, suddenly being the ultimate heartthrob in the world, because he's saying, I'm not going anywhere. I'm defending our homes. I'm looking after the women and children. Women respond to this and they intuit that this is a man at his best. They get it. And I want guys to understand that. Again, it's not the reason to do it, because women will find you more attractive, but they will, at least more attractive than you were. And I noticed this in college at the University of Illinois. I mentioned this at the beginning of the book. There's a poster that was in all the girls' rooms at the Christian house across the street and in all the dorms. It was the same poster. And it's the best-selling poster in the history of posters to this day. It's called L'Enfant. It's a French kind of artsy photo. I see this photo. It's a guy, and I'm sure he's attractive. He's a good-looking guy, and he's holding a baby. Why is this same poster in every girl's room? I was asking the question, like, what is the deal with this? I mean, there's a billion male models out there you can get, and it's even kind of a profile photo of this guy. They said it's not the guy, it's the way the baby's looking at him.
Mm-hmm.
The baby's making eye contact. He's holding the baby. The baby is looking up, making eye contact. Like, are you going to protect me? You are, right? You are. It's the way the baby is looking at. And as a young man who had not had any girlfriends, did not date, wanted to, but just didn't. I took note of that. Like, that's very interesting. And to this day,
get a baby.
Yeah. That's the lesson.
When I was in college, I took a marriage and family class, and the professor sent out a questionnaire to everybody in the class. And some of the questions were specific to the guys and some of them were specific to the girls. And the question that went both ways that was so just jumped back at me to all the women. He asked the question, what is the most important thing that you look for in a man? And almost without fail, it was something that had to do with the term tenderhearted.
Boy,
Yeah,
Brant Hansen has hit on a mother lode of wisdom and balance and, believe it or not, unity between the sexes because he was willing to say it. He was willing to step up, even if he does play the accordion and the flute. The book is The Men. You got to get this book. This is a great study for small groups of both men and women. The men we need. And we need to go, but we're coming back. Hey, we're talking with one of our favorite people in the world. He has an ability to say really profound, sometimes hard, even harsh things in a way that you don't feel condemned and put down about it. I wish I had that. I have a lot more enemies than you do, Brant. If I wrote a book on the men we need, they would crucify me. Just know, because there's something about me that just ticks people off. And something about you, when they say, good point, Dad.
Brant, you were talking off air about a study that you did with kind of that included average looking guys and so forth. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it wasn't very scientific or anything. It's just I've been interested in this whole phenomenon about what women are actually looking for, because like you can be jacked, you can be totally ripped and be married, and your wife will think that's really hot until you actually flirt with another woman. Or you worship your body and you're constantly working out and you don't show affection to her. Like she will resent your muscles at that point. They will be a turn off. because it bodes. What I'm trying to tell guys is the reason that's initially attractive is because it seems to suggest at some sort of primal level that this guy is going to be able to protect me in our home. But when she finds out that you're not actually up to it character-wise, she will find you very unattractive. Conversely, if you're not the best looking guy in the world, but your character suggests that you're going to be a rock and you are going to be a protector and somebody who is a keeper of the garden, who cultivates and protects the vulnerable, she'll find you very attractive. And I did this little thing, like I do it with high school groups or like big youth groups or, school assemblies or whatever. I would show pictures when I was just kind of looking into this of guys randomly pulled from the news. Just Google pictures. It'd be like some Japanese soldier holding an old lady over his shoulder, getting her out of trouble. A couple guys pulling a child out of a car in a ditch, a helicopter pilot getting somebody off a roof in a flood. And I would just go through all these photos, different ethnicities, different places, different settings. And I would get done just showing all these pictures real fast. And I'd say, hey, ladies, just curious, are those guys attractive? And there's a univocal, visceral, immediate, yes. And so I'm like, guys, I want you to take note of this. Let's go back through these slides. Some of these guys are portly. They're all different ages. They are normal dudes. And women are going wild. Why? It's because of what they're doing. Like there's something deeply resonant in the female psyche or what she's looking for. I'm like, that should be very instructive to you about what a woman calls you out to become. And when you don't act as keeper of the garden, she will not respect that. And she'll feel like she has to do it herself. And that's very threatening. And she'll wind up having to do all this stuff because you're not showing up. So that's good news for people like me, again, because I'm not somebody who's a manly man. I shouldn't even be shooting guns. I have a neurological problem. I can't see straight, all of that stuff. But my wife finds me attractive because I'm engaged and I'm willing to show up. I'm willing. I'll do what it takes. I'll walk out the door if I have to and protect us. But she knows that. And so she doesn't worry.
And typically we think of protecting our family as that external, like I'm going to lock all the doors. If it comes down, I got a bat. I've been watching action movies all my life. I'm ready for this. But the protection you're talking about is I need to feel safe. I need to know that you're protected from your worst self.
Yes. This is a brilliant point that was made in a book called The Masculine Mandate. If you want to buy that one, go ahead. But I borrowed it.
Is it as funny as yours? I don't care.
No, it's not nearly as good as mine. But this guy was quoting a friend of his who said, I always thought I would stand up to an intruder in my home. Like I would defend my wife and kids to the death until I realized the intruder is me with my words that cut her to ribbons or diminish her or make her feel less than, or my kids who wonder what kind of mood I'm going to show up in. He's like, I realized the guy I need to defend against is me. The guy who needs to die is me as a sinner. And I think that's a great point because it's like my words are so powerful. As keeper of this garden, I can introduce with my words insecurity into the system, which brings chaos into this garden. These people in my orbit, I want them to flower and flourish. So I am my wife's biggest supporter. I am my kids' biggest supporter. I do protect them from outside threat, but most of the time the threat is me. And I think your point is very valid. And when we reconsider that, it's one thing to flex and go, yeah, I got a shotgun. I'll protect anybody. I could try to get with, yeah, but how are you building them up with your words?
And it's such a great invitation. Sorry, George. That's accessible to everybody. Every guy can do that if they will step forward into that. Sorry, George, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, because it kind of follows along that same thought. And Brant, we had kind of mentioned it earlier. One of the crises of our time, culture, is like single parent homes. Fathers not in the homes. But that doesn't leave the males in that home, the boys in that home, hopeless with the kind of approach that you're taking. You can talk to a high school class and change lives there.
let me say this too. I'm from a background like that myself. So it's not like I'm looking at, I just lived this wonderful example. And so it's easy. It's the opposite. Sometimes we have to live in antithesis and go, I know what I'm not going to do. That's the case for a lot of us. But I'll tell you what, it's so wonderful. God says if you ask for wisdom, he's going to give it to you. So why not ask? And I'm trying to tell guys in this book, like, wisdom will tell you what's important and what's not. Wisdom will show you the relative value of things. That means everything to making decisions. You make 35,000 decisions a day, they say. I can't imagine going through life without wisdom. The other thing is the absence of wisdom is foolishness. And what I'm trying to tell guys is foolishness brings pain. So ask God for wisdom. If you didn't have the best example growing up or whatever, you can still have a direct line. And God never turns away a desperate person. If you're desperate for it, you're going to get it. And that's going to be a source of life for people around you and maybe for generations. And it started with you because you didn't have a great example, but it started with you and it resonated forever because you said, God, please help me.
And Brant, this is so good. I can hardly stand it. Profound. We'll be thinking about these things. I've thought new thoughts, and at my age, I don't have many new thoughts. And this is something that needs to be underlined and applied, and it would be for the healing of the nations. Brant, you keep writing. We'll keep talking to you, man. And we'll talk to you even if you don't write another word. But it's nice to have a subject. Brant, you're a gift. God bless you for spending the time with us. The name of the book is The Men We Need. God's Purpose for the Manly Man, the Avid Indoorsman, or any man just willing to show up. Get it and read it. You'll be glad. Hey, what a great hour. It always is with Brant Hansen. He is as vulnerable, as authentic. He's the real deal. And he has been given what he asked for. That is wisdom. We're engaged in major culture wars in this country. Victor, a sociologist at the University of Virginia by the name of Davidson, coined those words. But there's probably no place where culture wars shed more blood than in the relationship between sexes, men and women. I mean, things have changed so rapidly and so quickly. People have marked their territory. They've gotten their guns, and we're living in a context of hatred. And somebody like Brant Hansen comes along, and you got to read this book, The Men We Need. I don't care which side of the political spectrum you're on. There is such wisdom here. And as he said, he previewed it with over 500 people, and some of them were radical feminists. And they reacted positively to this. This is biblical and it's balanced. And when things are biblical and are seen that way, they really are wise. They really are balanced. They're not places that stir people up and make them angry and get their guns. They go, oh, I didn't understand before. So get this book. Think some new thoughts about culture wars. Think about your role as a man, as a woman, as a Christian, and what that involves. It's a lot different than what we have been told. Kathy, who's going to be on next week?
Well, this might turn out to be a little bit of a follow-up today in some ways. Then again, maybe not. Next week, our good friends, Elise Fitzpatrick and Eric Shoemaker, they have a new book out titled Jesus and Gender, Living as Sisters and Brothers in Christ. So they both will be with us, both Elise and Eric.
Well, we, having been educated during this hour, will next week provide incredible questions and insights to Elise and her pastor friend, and we will straighten out any heretical views that we will thereby discover. We're gone, but I know. But we're going to come back next week, same time, same place. It's our fond hope that you join us. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. That gives you a wide, wide berth.